All right, we kick off another season, 2016. Let's first talk about Sam Foltz and the passing of the punter, and that was on a lot of guys' minds here, obviously, as they move the transition onto the football field. Eventually, they're going to have to start practicing. What was your thoughts about the way the guys were handled today?
You know, I think it's been now over a week, and it's obviously been a very long week for several people, including Drew Brown, but you got the sense this team has moved forward, and they want to honor Sam Foltz. And there's no question, Sam Foltz's legacy is still going to very much be a part of the day-to-day of this football program. We saw it right away with the number 27 being put on the back of the helmets. His locker is going to be left empty. The Foltz family honored here at the Fan Day on Wednesday. So I think there are a lot of things that will have Sam Foltz's presence around this team, around this season, even though it's been a very difficult last few days here for the program.
Yeah, and Mike Riley said even though they haven't elected captains yet, it was likely that Sam Foltz would have been one of those captains, but perhaps getting on the football field will be another step in getting to that new normalcy. Let's talk about that football team and the position battles. What position battles jump out at you? I would think both sides of the line would jump out at you first.
Yeah, I think when you look at the offensive line today, the starting five is pretty well set, but I do still think David Neville is unproven, and you know, if he struggles, they're going to have to make some decisions, whether that's Corey Whitaker, Sam Hahn, or even a freshman like Matt Farniak. That's one position on the line where you don't know what you're getting yet because David Neville's never played really in a game in his time at Nebraska. But you look on the defensive line, I think the defensive tackle position is where the questions are. Nebraska lost 4 defensive linemen this year that had eligibility to return, and it put them in a hole. I mean, they kind of knew Collins and Valentine were going to go, at least Collins, but losing McMullen late, Kevin Williams late, it really threw a curveball to this season. And I think a lot is hope, expectation that Mick Stoltenberg is going to be a guy, and I think the Davis twins, Carlos and Khalil, for this line to take form, Andy, Nebraska needs those guys to really step up and have big camps.
Mike Riley saying that the linebackers at this point last year was kind of similar to what the defensive line is this year, so maybe the defensive line can make those same strides. Speaking of those linebackers, it's a pretty deep group. A
year ago, this was a ragtag bunch of nobodies and a lot of injuries, and now it's all of a sudden maybe one of the deepest positions on this team. I think there are 6 linebackers that could play this year for Nebraska, where a year ago there were times where they might only had 2. So I do think Dedrick Young playing as a freshman, Michael Rose-Ivy being healthy, Marcus Newby getting valuable steps, Josh Banderas, that's the X factor to me for this season. You have Luke Gifford back there, Michael Rose-Ivy. I mean, there are so many names now that come to the table with legitimate game experience, which should be a huge plus.
Yeah, they'll have to eliminate those explosive plays. Mike Riley saying that at the podium on Monday. Other side of the football, that running back could be a running back by committee unless one of those guys steps up, and one of the guys he mentioned was a true freshman.
And I think secretly Mike Riley doesn't want a committee situation, but that's kind of where it's still at. But yeah, you mentioned Trey Bryant, a very promising freshman, was the St. Louis High School Football Player of the Year, comes in with huge credentials. But Divino Zigbo, Terrell Newby, and Mikael Wilbon, I mean, those are the three-headed monster right now. That's the three-headed monster for Nebraska right now. I don't know what direction they go. I really like what Ozigbo brings. I think just that physical punch he brings to the table will be helpful. But I think Newby had a great spring, and Wilbon's kind of that guy that you're still intrigued by what he can do, and he's never really been able to prove it yet in a game.
Yeah, we haven't talked about Tommy Armstrong. Obviously, he's the unquestioned starter, but I think that to a bigger picture, Mike Riley talked about his team being hungry and looking for leaders. That's why he didn't name or elect captains prior to the summer. How important is Tommy Armstrong to the mix of this team?
He's very important. I mean, he's a 4-year starting quarterback that's going to maybe go down as the statistical offensive record holder for everything at Nebraska. Touchdowns, passing yards, rushing yards, possibly for a quarterback. I mean, you look at what he could accomplish here over his career, total yards, offense. He's going to go down as one of the greatest, but is he going to get a championship or something to go with those accolades? That's really the question. I think for this team to be successful, they need Tommy to be a leader and a respected guy on and off the field, and there's no doubt. I mean, I think this team is a 7-type win to a 10-win type team. And I think a lot of that is Tommy Armstrong. He's the difference from taking them maybe from that 7-5 to maybe a 10-2 type of record.
And lastly, we talked about the word hunger and hungry, being hungry. That's really the theme today. How important is that theme, and how important will it be to stay hungry throughout the camp when it gets to week 2 and week 3?
Yeah, that is the grind. It's going to be hot, as we know. Nebraska is going to do the afternoon practices. They're not doing the night stuff that we've seen in the past, which is good for us, by the way. Our wives will get us home before midnight.
Yes,
but I think having these afternoon practices will test the team in the heat. But yeah, that third week particularly, those are the dog days of training camp. And I think for this team, when you look at the season overall, it's all about the start. Last year Nebraska got off to a 2-loss start in non-conference, losing to Miami and BYU. They can't afford that type of start because this is not a place where you want to get in the hole. The fans panic, the media gets on you, and that, I think, trickles down to the players. So I think this year the start is as big as anything, and that Oregon game early on, when you look at the schedule, I mean, that's going to mean everything to me on how this season goes.
Yeah, that will happen in week 3. However, the Huskers, before that, will get a full month of work in before the opener the first Saturday in September against Fresno State.